So welcome back to Rhododendron Week. My name is Seamus O'Brien. I'm the head gardener here at the National Botanic Gardens, Kilmacurragh. Really what I just want to talk about today is the basic taxonomy of rhododendrons and how you can simplify identifying rhododendrons. And the strug behind me, it gives you a very good idea of just how beautiful these plants are. Rhododendron, of course, is derived from rose tree. It's Greek, and they are slightly like roses. While they're peaking, they're sort of at peak season now in early April and mid-April. If you plant your garden very cleverly, rhododendrons can flower for you from any time from January right up until August. So they are spectacular plants, very, very varied, everything from dwarf alpine plants to some of the sort of giants that we've seen out in the garden on earlier visits. What I'd really like to do is to sort of show you that whilst there are a lot of rhododendrons out there and they are hugely variable, by learning the basic taxonomic names and nomenclature of plant parts, that it can be simplified, and by breaking them down into different groups it can be simplified. There's sort of a number of important things to know about identifying rhododendrons, and I suppose the most important of those is what sort of rhododendron are you dealing with. And the two terms to remember are, is it a lepidote species or is it an elepidote species? And by saying that, what I mean is that if you look at these two rhododendrons, so this is a really nice species, it's Rhododendron madeni, subspecies crassum, and this is Rhododendron falconeri. So if you look at the underside of the leaves, you can see that they are very different. And if you use a hand lens, this is a really useful instrument, and by looking at the underside of the leaf, I can see very clearly scales. So a lepidote species has scales. An elepidote species are missing those scales. So if I again look at the underside of the leaf, I can't see any scales there. So instantly you've broken down the two groups. So of the 1,200 species, you can roughly break them into about half of them are lepidote, half of them are elepidote. So just learn to know what you're dealing with. Something else that's really important is the shape of the leaf. You know, what are you dealing with? Is that leaf, is it, something that's lance-shaped? Is it obovate? Is it wider in the middle? What size is that leaf? Because you can see actually these are very, very different in scale and in size. The underside of the leaves are completely different. What's it like on the upper surface? Is it rugulose? Is it corrugated? Is it smooth? And then also, very important, two terms that are really important is does it have ingementum or tomentum? So ingementum is this sort of very sort of fluffy, woolly substance that's on the underside of the leaf. What that does in the wild is it acts as a duvet to that plant. It coats it from cold at high altitude. What we're looking at here, by the way, is Rhododendron falconeri, subspecies eximium. It's endemic to Arunachal Pradesh, which is a state in northeast India. And if I take off a single leaf, you can see that it's got this wonderful sort of fawn-coloured fur on the underside of the leaf. So that's ingementum, whereas if you turn the leaf on the upper side, very often our visitors say, what's wrong with your rhododendron? There's nothing wrong with it. This plant is covered in tomentum. So whilst the ingementum is protecting the plant from cold at high altitude in the Himalaya, tomentum is acting as a UV barrier. So essentially this is factor 50. It's sun protection because it is growing in an area that gets very high light intensity. Also as well, what's on the leaf, if it's not ingementum, you can see, and again actually this hand lens is useful for that, but in fact I don't even need it for this species. This is Rhododendron ciliatum. It's one of Joseph Hooker's rhododendrons, low growing, not terribly tall, parent of some of the really beautiful scented hybrids that you grow in gardens. It's called Rhododendron ciliatum because if you look close up on the foliage, you can see it's got these what are called ciliate hairs on top of the leaf. And again, that's one of the factors on how you identify this species. And then you've got some rhododendrons that are absolutely sort of glaucous on the underside. So this is Rhododendron decorum. subspecies Diaprepes. It's from our garden here. It's George Forrest's original collection from the Mekong-Salween Divide. You can see it's absolutely glaucous underneath. Very late flowered. This species, it's tree-like, but it flowers in June, July, when most other species have finished. So you can see the variation on the underside of leaves. So these are just two that I've picked from the garden. So it's very important as well to know the colour of those leaves and what they're doing. So you can see in this case, this is Rhododendron arborium. So it's a silver underside to the leaf. This is arborium subspecies cinnamomum. It's found at higher altitude. And again, actually, this is sort of protecting the plant from winter cold. This will grow at relatively low altitude. This will grow at much higher altitudes. Staying on leaves for a moment. So this is Rhododendron altitlerense. Rhododendron leaves are carried, they're spiraling along the stem. So you can see that they're sort of moving around the stem, but they're carried in what are called pseudo whorls. It looks as though that the leaves are coming from right around the stem off one point. But again, if you look closer, you can see that the petiole, now there's another important term. So if I pick a leaf, so this is the leaf stalk, which is referred to as the petiole. So those petioles have twisted and pushed the leaf up to form this pseudo whorl. So that's Rhododendron altitlerense. That's sort of, some information on leaves and what to expect, and what to watch out for on leaves. But then we come to flowers. So again, actually, there's a couple of technical terms that are important to know. So this is Rhododendron thompsoni. So Thomas Thompson was a friend of Joseph Hooker. He travelled in the Himalaya with him. In the 1850s, he travelled again in Sikkim, and he sent two batches of his seed collections to Glasnevin in the 1850s. But some of the really important terms to learn are pedicel. So the pedicel is the stalk that holds the rhododendron flower, and you can see that also if I break a flower off of a different species. This is Rhododendron grande, so you can see these are the pedicels. And then moving on through the flower, the calyx. So the calyx is what protects the flower before it opens. And in many cases in rhododendrons, the calyx is very much reduced or absolutely absent. So you can see on Rhododendron grande, there is nothing showing there. But if you look at Rhododendron thompsoni, you can see this sort of fleshy flower-like calyx. It's already turning red to match the colour of the flower. That is very important, the size of the calyx. And the calyx is very generally 5-lobed, and you can see that it is very prominent on Rhododendron thompsoni. The corolla, so the flower itself, it's lobed. And how many lobes are there? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So in this case, it's matching the number of lobes on the corolla. So that's very important to know. What's the shape of the flower? So if you look at these, like the flower shape changes. So is that flower, is it campanulate? Is it bell-shaped? Is it saucer-shaped? What's it doing as well? So what you need to watch out for, and this is Rhododendron, it's a Rhododendron grande hybrid, is it spotted? So this is a grande arborium hybrid. It's picked up the spotting from arborium. And what's also important are the nectar sacs. So this is something that brings bees in to pollinate the flower. So the nectar sacs are found at the base of the flower. You can see it's these very dark pouches down here. So count the number of nectar pouches that are down in the flower. It's very important. It is a way of identifying. So if you look at Virea rhododendrons, which we grow a lot of on our site at Glasnevin, they don't have nectar pouches. It's mainly the outdoor species that do it. And then what's critical as well are the number of stamens that you see in the centre of the flower. Generally it's 10, but it can vary actually, so count the number of stamens that you see in there. So that's on the flower itself actually. It's just one of the ways of telling the species. And you can sort of see the variation on the flower size, the flower shape, the flower colour, all very important to include. So it can get slightly confusing because rhododendrons are very promiscuous plants, and sometimes, and particularly in the garden situation, you get a lot of hybrids. You will see this a lot also in the wild. And you can see this is Rhododendron grande, which we've got a big old specimen out in the garden. So this is the true species, but that can actually hybridize here and it has hybridized here and also in the wild. And And what this is essentially is these two have hybridized. So this is Rhododendron arborium var rosium. It's hybridized with grande, and you can see you get these intermediates. So it's not always easy when you're dealing with big collections, because you will get these hybrids popping up in between. So that's the very aptly named grande. So on this table, what I've done is I've just put together one representative group of Rhododendron arborium and its hybrids. So just to explain that, Rhododendron arborium, for starters, it's the national flower of Nepal. It covers entire hillsides, not just in Nepal. There's a huge range from Afghanistan right across onto the borders of Western China. And because it's got that enormous sort of distribution, it's very variable. Outside of the Himalaya, you also get disjunct populations. So if you go to Sri Lanka, for example, you've got Rhododendron arborium subspecies Zeylanicum, very different morphologically to the Himalayan species. If you climb Mount Victoria in Burma, you've got Rhododendron arborium var albotomentosum, introduced through our Glasnevin site at the turn of the 20th century. Beautiful plant, much tighter habit than standard arborium. And then if you go to southern India, you've got Rhododendron arborium var nilegricum. Again, very, very different to what you find in the Himalaya. But actually, what I want to show you for the moment is just sort of the arboriums that you tend to meet while you're traveling in the Himalaya. So this is Rhododendron arborium. So these are some of the selections that we have here in the garden. It's actually a very distinct species. It's actually very easy to tell. The absolute best selections are always very tender, unfortunately, and that's why you'll only find them very rarely in the coastal gardens of Britain and Ireland that are washed by the Gulf Stream. And we're very lucky that we're just 4 miles away from the coast here at Kilmacurragh. So how do you tell it? Well, Rhododendron arborium always has these fantastic blood red flowers, but if you turn it over, you can see it's gleaming silver on the underside. So this makes a whacking great tree. In 2019, I led a group up Mount Japfu in Nagaland in northeast India, and we trekked to a tree that was fully 108 feet tall, taller than the round tower at Glendalough, monstrous sized trunk. And if you were to visit those mountains right now, this is what you would see. 108 feet of a tower of sort of red blossoms. And then you can see from these leaves, by the way, that how it varies. So when you're at low altitude, you get Rhododendron arborium with silver leaves, but then as you steadily increase in altitude, you get these darker sort of markings of ingementum on the back of the leaf. So this is Rhododendron arborium, but this is Rhododendron arborium subspecies Cinnamomum, and it has this layer of ingementum to protect the plant from winter cold. So looking at the sort of variation that you get, and staying for the moment with the silver-leafed Rhododendron arborium, this is a variant of it. So this is Rhododendron arborium var rosium. So we've got lots of different forms out in the garden, and you can see, just look at the underside of the leaf first. Is it silver? So straight away, yes, that's arborium. If it's a red flower, it's Rhododendron arborium var arborium. If it's this lovely pink, it's Rhododendron arborium var rosium. And the var rosium, to confuse things even further, actually, can sometimes be white. So this is what we would term the white form of var rosium. Now, Rhododendron arborium, as I've stated, and its allies grow right across the Himalayan range. So by the time that you dip down into places like Thailand, into Vietnam, into Laos, into Western China, you get Rhododendron arborium var delavei, and you can see it has a much sort of deeper coloured ingementum. The leaves are narrower, they are shorter. Sorry, it's just fallen apart as I picked it up. But I should state actually that this is taken from the tree that flowered for the first time outside of China. So Rhododendron arborium subspecies delavei was named for a famous French missionary collector, Père Jean-Marie Delavay, and he travelled to China in the late 19th century. In 1883, he climbed a mountain range called the Kangshan Range above Dali in Yunnan province. He collected seeds, he sent them back to the Vilmorin nursery, outside of Paris. Seedlings were raised here and they were dispatched to Kew, and such was the fame of the gardens here at Kilmacurragh that they were sent directly from Kew to Thomas Acton at Kilmacurragh, with the effect that they flowered for the very first time outside of China here in the gardens in 1904. And then sometimes it can be confusing because, as I say, you've got hybrids. So this is our own Rhododendron Thomas Acton, and what it is a cross between Rhododendron campanulatum, and that's where it inherits this lovely buff brown ingementum, and a white form. So it's a cross between campanulatum and a white form of Rhododendron arborium, subspecies Cinnamomum. So you can see the similarities between the two of them. So again, this is Rhododendron altitlerense, the high clear rhododendron. Again, turn it over, really important look on the underside of the leaf, and you can see straight away actually that it's just dull green. It's glaucous compared to arborium. So very often people grow this in their gardens and they think they've got arborium, but it's not. It's an arborium hybrid. So same story with, this is one of our own hybrids. This is Rhododendron Actin, and it has all the markings and the characteristics. You know, when you see it out in the garden, it's a big tree-like, it's a big, big, big rhododendron. But again, turn it over, really important to turn it over. And you can see it's completely glaucous, it's green, there's no ingementum beneath there. So that tells you immediately that it's not pure arborium, it's something else. So that's just really a very brief take on how to identify rhododendrons, and it's a basic taxonomy of rhododendrons. I hope it's been helpful, I hope it's been instructive. And again, just to remind you that Kilmacurragh is open at the moment. The place is a right of colour, and we'd love if you could come visit.